The Waking Tree by C. Don McCallum. Chapter 8. Listen. Abra laid uncovered in bed, pulling apart her vomit-encrusted hair, letting it drop over her wan, gazing face. The humming was too loud to sleep through, so she listened for its melody instead. She hoped it would find a way to shout through to her and pull her out of her stupor. Its message had to hold the secret of what held her so still in her bed, she was sure. She caught glimpses of the song, but she knew on some level that she didn't want to hear it any more than it wanted to be heard. But stray words kept gathering around her where she lay, so she tried to arrange them into something similar to meaning. The words told her of a hot summer day, of a longed for love, and the trappings of a wooden box. Snapshots of seemingly unconnected memories. And there was metal slamming down hard, crushing a wide open and lush world into another claustrophobic, stagnant one. All of the images, the song, the words seemed to be coming from the chest of drawers at the foot of her bed, or someplace just beyond the wall behind it. She thought of Josephine and wanted to lie beside her to touch her hair. Rolling over and off the bed, Abra was relieved that she didn't feel as sick as she had in the earlier hours of the morning. She wiped the cracker crumbs off her chest onto the floor and closed her eyes. She could make it a while longer before she would have to eat again, eat to soften her sickness. Behind her closed eyelids, the song's sound rippled and shook their moan across her darkened vision. Her feet walked themselves to the song's slow pulse and went searching for the source. She stopped first at the dresser and touched its long ago stained surface. Mostly smooth, she ran her fingers along the dark grain from which the hum sprung and throbbed, yet she also felt it pouring from the next room, just as strong. She thought of Bernadine. Her mother-in-law's form laced its way through all of the holes in the wavering young woman. Abra stood stronger now and felt an increasing need to hold her child sleeping in the next room. Perhaps Josephine's warmth would persuade Abra's will to keep the baby growing inside of her. In the hallway, the sound waves wrapped around Abra and pulled her closer to the source. The song was almost inside of her now, but her too thick skin and the buzz of the air conditioner still would not let the full melody seep into her. Letting what music she could gather around her fill her body, Abra closed her eyes and leaned against the wall. She wanted to breathe comfortably as she had when she was a little girl, even though her own mother had only ever sought her out for other reasons. Abra's mother had always relished ridiculing her, making Jared's eventual proposal of marriage a palatable offer. Bernadine's presence had made it all livable, but now she was gone. Abra opened her eyes, and the warmth of the morning sun greeted her behind the light pink veil of her daughter's curtains. Behind the house, I waved at her. No, Abra, I said, too quiet to be heard through the window panes. The wind and I dance for your daughter to dream by, to wake and live by. Josephine lay sleeping on her side, almost imperceptibly rocking to the beat of the many tuneless hums and whispers. Abra lay down on the edge of the bed beside Josephine's tiny frame, clutching her own little doll, looking like a marionette waiting for its turn to perform in her master's show. On the cool and pink sheets, Abra breathed in her daughter's scent. Josephine's sweet, dried sweat and saliva, a hint of dirt and the outdoors. A light stream rolled out of her open mouth, down her cheek, onto her moist pillow which softly supported her head. Abra placed her hand on the side of Josephine's face and felt her heat. Josephine's thick black hair flowed over and around her. Abra stroked it and let each strand of hair find a ticklish place under her hand. Josephine's slight rocking stopped, and she dropped her body flat on her back. Abra raised herself up on her elbow and watched her baby's little trunk rise and fall. Placing her ear gently to Josephine's chest, she listened to her heart. The tiny thump also matched the rhythm of the hum all around them. Abra closed her eyes again to see the sound waves, but the melody was still too distant to recognize. Lifting herself up again, Abra pulled herself next to Josephine, draped her arm over her, and laid her head next to the pool on the pillow. But she wasn't close enough. She slipped her other arm under Josephine's neck and drew her close to her, held her. She closed her eyes and tried to look into the future of this child and of Darnell sleeping in the next room. Perhaps somewhere under the thin, rolling layer of eyelids she could see some movement of these people whom she had created, and she could hold on to it long enough to see the height to which these two would grow and how they would get there. And she prayed that her children, even the quiet one now growing inside her, wouldn't fall into her kind of madness. Please, God, keep them sane, she said in her blood. Darnell was creeping into her corner. Like her, he let the voices destroy him, but she didn't know how to stop it. There were no doctors to call or books to read for such a disease, and she feared that she wouldn't be able to get close enough to him to heal him just a little with her touch. He didn't look her in the eyes anymore. Maybe Josephine would be safe from the voices and the demands they liked to place on those they tormented. On the verge of waking, Josephine stirred, feeling herself in her mother's arms inside, holding her mother back. A little thud hit the bed behind Josephine. Abra's eyes popped open. She lifted her head and looked over Josephine's shifting body. A penny laid on the pillow. Gravity had peeled it off of Josephine's neck. Abra didn't understand why the coin was there in her daughter's bed any more than she understood why the humming was louder now. Josephine, Abra said over the indecipherable music. What's this? Josephine took a deep breath and mumbled. They got tired of the drawer. They? Abra asked. Josephine nodded, dropping her head down to her mother's chest to listen to her heart and to feel her warmth. Abra took her arm off her daughter's body, ran her fingers under the pillow, and knocked a single cold layer of 50 or more coins. Lifting her daughter, Abra flipped the pillow up and off onto the floor. The profiles of presidents looked off the edges of their metal boundaries to the unseen and disembodied future, humming their collective song. Josephine. Abra shook her daughter out of her ebbing sleep. Where did you get these? Josephine craned her head up, looked at her pretty coins, and smiled through her sleepy eyes. They wanted out of Daddy's drawer. Did Daddy say you could take them? No, they asked me to. Who? Them. Josephine lifted herself up and rested on her elbows, looking at the money she had liberated. She placed her hands on the coins, patting them warm, pulling them up with her nighttime stickiness. They asked you too? Abra asked, on her elbows too now. Josephine nodded. Abra couldn't breathe. She didn't want it to be like this. She wanted her daughter to be normal and only hear what was told to her by people, living people, and to hear only the provable noises of the world. Why did they ask you to? Abra grew impatient, scared. Her throat tightened. She felt a new sickness rising. Because they don't like Daddy's drawer. They don't. No. Josephine raked the coins over to herself in a pile and sat up. They like the sun, she whispered, dropping them into the pouch she had created by pulling up her silky blue nightgown. Scooting off of the bed, Josephine's feet hit the floor, and she walked to the window, admiring the song of the coins humming along. Abra forced herself up to watch Josephine lower herself to the windowsill. Josephine let the coins roll down her legs to the floor. One by one, Josephine laid the coins down so they could face the sun and let it caress them with its warmth. Abra rose and walked to Josephine's side. She sat on her knees as her daughter had done and rested her hands on her lap, watching Josephine's tiny fingers slide each coin into its own special place. Their faces were serene, looking northward, and for the first time, not only the blood-heavy melody, but the words were clear to Abra. They wanted to see beyond the walls of their round cages. They wanted to walk free again. The song became louder, and the meaning of the melody and the accompanying words pulsed through the two of them. Josephine and Abra had to do something to set them free. I don't know how, Abra thought, and as quickly as the cloud in Abra's mind had uncovered the song's meaning, it hid itself again. The song no longer made sense. The humming had moved, muffled again by the strain of its own struggle to be heard. Then it pulsed again, this time in the chest of drawers in the next room. Under the quick, moist blinks of their eyes, Abra and Josephine saw the blood, deep red and plentiful, that had run in the drawers so many years ago. The suffering, the years of silence, the long struggle to be heard were all felt and experienced by these two as they breathed in the convoluted song emitting from the coins, from the drawer. Abra shook at the pain and loneliness of the little boy, Christopher. She saw her own son dead in the drawer, his limbs hacked and mangled. She saw Josephine there. She saw herself wandering the grooves of the grain for years, looking for something she could never have again. Christopher's arms, legs, torso, and head had lain there and drained their life into the wood. Abra, Josephine, and Darnell, too, could feel every instant of the agonizing ordeal. But through the darkness of it all, Josephine could see a way out. The way was blocked and visibility was low, but she felt her way through the grooves, trying to find the opening through which they could escape. Something, maybe it was the wind or the earthworms or a tree standing rooted outside, told her how to maneuver through the years of grievous solitude Christopher had endured in the drawer. She was almost out, and she would carry the boy out with her one piece at a time. We can free him, Josephine told her mother as she fingered the coins on the windowsill. We will. In the next room, Darnell thrashed and sweated under his heavy blankets as the sun crept its way into his room. Under the boy's eyelids, in a dark place in his mind, the splinters dug under Darnell's skin as the wooden man, the one from the wall, the one with the pointed head, dragged him out of his bed. All around them, the house's carpet burned his skin, and the black-top road bloodied his legs, which kicked and dangled behind him. The wooden man's hollow laughter echoed through Darnell's head, made his marrow shake. Wooden fingers clinched Darnell's arms with immovable strength. A hole in the woods, in the limestone-filled soil, was already dug and waiting to be filled with a new life, Darnell's life. The ladies of the wall danced, laughing around the hole they had just finished digging. The dirt they had unearthed fell from them as they melodically shook in their circle. Grabbing Darnell's legs, the ladies guided his limbs into the hole. The limestone sucked at Darnell's feet, ankles, and calves, closing in around him. The wooden man ran his hands over Darnell's skin, splintering the boy bloody, giving him the moisture needed to grow. Darnell's blood dampened the soil, further preparing him for his transition. He stood stiff and unbending, planted newly in the earth. He tried to pull his legs, but they were already spreading deep into the earth's surface, searching for water and earth food to nourish his body. Be still and live, the earth said in her deep, moaning voice. I'm a boy, Darnell cried at her, writhing, trying to pull himself free, even if that meant separating himself from his now changing legs. So am I, a voice behind him said, the voice from the house. The sun ran toward the horizon, leaving shadows to cast themselves behind all of the earth. Darnell turned his head and saw a silhouette hiding behind him that was not his own. The boy had no definite features that Darnell could see, only small pale hands that reached around Darnell's knees to bend them. The shadowy boy planted a foot on the back of one of Darnell's half-buried calves and pulled himself onto his shoulders. The sun rolled across the sky with increasing haste until each day strobed instantly into night, each day and each night lasting only a second. The wooden man watched while wandering among the trees, helping a bird gather twigs and grass for the nest. It would build in the limbs, spurning off of Darnell's once human form with each rotation of the earth. His legs extended deep into the earth as subterranean creatures ate and dug their way in tunnels under him. Boys love trees, the little boy crawling on Darnell's limbs told him. The words crept through a flood of garbling nonsense coming both from the boy and the wooden man. The boy pulled a small canvas bag from the inside of his dusty, bloody blue shirt. Christopher, Darnell asked, his fear growing, seeing the sparkle of metal through the thick canvas. What are you doing? But his words were air now, and he no longer breathed. Carbon dioxide seeped into his pores. New bark and leaves and roots emerged from his skin and hair. The wooden man chuckled at Darnell's clumsy speech as he climbed up his trunk, showing the bird where he may begin his new home for his little family. He set the nest down next to Darnell's head, next to his eyes. He sat next to Christopher and held out his hand. The boy, flashing white then colorless in the quick darkness of night, pulled a thick sheet of sandpaper and a knife from his bag. Words came. "Free us, and we will free you," were the only words Darnell could make out in between the sounds of his own screams. The wooden man laughed and cut Darnell's bark away as the boy spoke. Too painful to hear. Christopher sanded Darnell's newly cut wounds smooth and told him his story of too much blood and how to live in bits and pieces. Worms gnawed at Darnell's deeply rooted toes and turned up the soil at his calves to watch his eyes as he fell back in pain. The wooden man and the boy lay down beside him, and the boy's story continued in whispers as nonsensical as wind. The world pulsed in light and darkness as vines wrapped itself around what was left of his hair over his face. Darnell watched the worms squirm toward his eyes, hungry. Outside the boys' room, the winds tickled the tops of the trees, which shivered all the way down to their roots, waking an earthworm who shared Darnell's nightmare. The earthworm spit and choked on what it thought to be the boy's flesh. A bit of tow oozed from the tiny orifice, or so the worm first thought. Realizing where it was in the earth, the worm glided forward to sniff out the former contents of his mouth and stomach. It was only dirt, thank God. "Where is the boy?" the earthworm asked, emerging from the rocky soil. "He is safe. He lives as a boy," I explained. "He thrashes in his bed," sang the cardinal. "He resists the wind too much. He doesn't let water roll off of him and back onto the earth. His ears do not hear," I explained, swaying and fluttering gently in the cool morning breeze. "The earth's breath is sweetest when the sun first heats it and the clouds kiss the world with their dew." "He presses too hard on the earth," a worm explained as the bird swooped down. A crow paced on an electrical wire. "He's like his mother," he said and laughed. "There are many walking shadows in that house," he said and flew away. At last they see the boy Christopher, so long shaking the confining walls of that once bloody drawer. "They see his suffering," I said, "but they have not mastered the wood. They find themselves as stuck in the grain as Christopher has been." All took a deep breath, and in a swirl of leaves, Bernadine shuffled in the fast flowing wind high above the house. "That will change," she told them all, and crept up to the window of Abra's room. Overcome by the violence in her body, Abra ran through the hallway to her bathroom. At the sound of her mother's distant retching, Josephine gathered the coins up in the sock and Rachel and followed her mother's path. The little girl unloaded her bounty on the floor at the foot of her parents' bed, twisting Rachel's legs at the hips, allowing her friend to sit at her side while she arranged the coins and some of the old photographs she'd found in the attic into a pretty cobblestone path leading to the old chest of drawers. Josephine straightened Rachel's legs and walked the doll along the path. Each time they reached the end of the road, they hopped back to the beginning again. "Don't worry, Rachel," Josephine explained. "We're going to Grandma's house. When we get there, we'll make a place for us to pray in." Abra moaned on her bed, slipping into Darnell's nightmare. If he hadn't been her own son, she wouldn't have recognized him under the bark and prickly, verdant cedar needles. "Darnell," Abra called to her boy, "we're going to get you out of here. Josephine's looking for a way." Standing next to the tree that was her son, Abra extended her hand, stroking the loose hanging bark on his trunk. Instead of calming Darnell, his mother's touch only made him shirk and tremble. Her hand on Darnell's body, she tried to find his eyes so she could look into them with love. A hand emerged from under the bark and grabbed her own. The little fingers held her vise tight. Christopher's hand. "Let go," she screamed. "Let go of my boy." "Help me get out," the little voice said from within the tree, the hand clenching tighter. Abra pulled the hand, trying to free herself, but was only able to shake herself out of the dream. In bed, she lay trying not to move or breathe and just listen to all of the music around her, especially that of Josephine's soft, far-off voice. Abra collapsed. The nausea limited her, held her down, and she was grateful for the quiet sleep that overtook her exhausted body while Rachel's cold little feet pounced on the coins on its journey to Grandma's house. "She has lilies to smell and touch and honeysuckle to taste," Josephine informed her little friend. "And trees," Abra managed to say. "And trees," Josephine and Rachel squealed, quickening their pace. "The girl understands the wind," a butterfly said, resting on a sunflower. Josephine told her eternally pleased doll that they were going to Grandma's house where they would learn about all sorts of flowers. Through the window, Bernadine smiled at her granddaughter's simple playing. A gust of wind blew hard and shook the flowers and trees. Every one of the creatures living relaxed but held on, careful not to blow too far from where they wished to be. Josephine looked up and out of the window. She loved the sound of the wind. "Some people fly kites on days like this," Josephine whispered in Rachel's ear. Bernadine smiled and admired the calm sky blue sparkle in Josephine's eyes and came in closer so she could sit by the girl and think of how she would brush her stringy, wind-tousled hair if she could. "We'd fly kites on days like this, Josephine," Bernadine whispered, wanting to touch the girl's soft, white skin. "If I were there." But when she entered the room, it wasn't the girl who secured her attention. At the end of the dolly's cobblestone path sat the chest of drawers, and it cried to her, wanting the freedom that was long alien to the voice inside the wood construction. Her boy, Christopher. Thank you for listening to The Waking Tree by C. Don McCallum. If you're enjoying this story, please consider sharing it with someone you know. And please like the video and subscribe to this channel to help others discover these stories.